It is a profound truth that there exists a test which the soul endures in absolute silence. This test lies beyond the reach of therapists, beyond the pages of self-help books, beyond even the understanding of those who love you most. You may have lived through years believing you were simply surviving difficult times, quite unaware that you were, in fact, undergoing the most rigorous examination a human consciousness can ever face. In my decades of work, I have studied these invisible initiations that reshape certain souls completely. I have observed that some individuals pass through what I have termed the process of individuation by means of a doorway of profound suffering. A suffering that leaves no external scars, yet transforms everything within. The signs of this transformation, however, are not obvious. They manifest in the most subtle of ways, recognizable only to those souls who have themselves walked this path. Perhaps you have already passed this test without knowing it. Perhaps the evidence is written in your energy, in the way you move through the world, in the quality of your presence that others sense but cannot name. These 7 signs we might explore are not achievements to be celebrated with fanfare, but quiet recognitions, an inner knowing that one's consciousness has been forever altered by its encounter with its deepest truth. I have come to understand that certain souls undergo what can be called a second psychological birth during their lifetime. This birth does not announce itself loudly. It happens in the spaces between words, in the silence after storms, in the moment when you realize that the person you thought you were fighting to become already lives quietly within you. The essential question, then, is not whether you are worthy of this transformation, but whether you can recognize that it has already begun. Like a tree that grows stronger after surviving a lightning strike, the psyche develops a new form of resilience. This is not the brittle strength that resists all pressure, but the flexible power that bends without breaking, that incorporates challenge into its very structure. One learns to metabolize difficulty in a way that transforms poison into medicine, chaos into clarity. The first sign reveals itself in your relationship with solitude. Where once aloneness felt like a punishment, it has now been transformed into a sanctuary. I have written extensively about the abandonment complex, that deep psychological wound which drives us to scatter our energy in desperate searches for approval and connection. When this complex no longer governs your choices, something fundamental has shifted. Your energy ceases to disperse itself in seeking validation from without. A particular quality of stillness emerges in those who have passed through their soul's most demanding trial. It is not the stillness of withdrawal or depression, but the quietude that comes from no longer needing to convince anyone of your worth, including yourself. You find yourself capable of being genuinely alone without that restless urge to fill the space with noise, activity, or other people's energy. This solitude becomes creative rather than destructive. It is in these quiet moments that you discover your best insights arise not from interaction with others, but from communion with the deeper parts of yourself that only emerge when the external world grows silent. I have identified this capacity for meaningful solitude as a hallmark of the individuated personality. You may begin to notice how others flee from themselves through constant social engagement, endless entertainment, or relationships that serve as distractions rather than true connections. There is no judgment in this observation, only a quiet recognition of patterns you once followed yourself. The paradox becomes clear. The more comfortable you become with your own company, the more attractive you become to those seeking authentic connection. Your nervous system has recalibrated. Where once the unknown triggered automatic anxiety, you now approach mystery with what I have called active imagination. You develop an appetite for the liminal spaces where transformation lives. Those threshold moments where one version of yourself dissolves and another emerges. The second sign manifests in your relationship with your own shadow. Much of my career was spent exploring shadow integration, the process by which we stop rejecting the darker aspects of our personality and begin to work with them consciously. This integration occurs within you in ways that would have been impossible before your trial. You develop a brutal honesty with yourself about your capacity for manipulation, your hunger for power, your ability to wound others when threatened. Rather than terrifying you, this self-knowledge becomes a source of strength. You recognize these impulses not as character flaws to be eliminated, but as primal energies to be understood and channeled consciously. Your anger transforms from something that either exploded destructively or festered in repression into what might be called a sacred fire. It burns now only what needs to be destroyed in your life. Relationships that no longer serve your growth, patterns that keep you small, agreements you made when you knew less about your own worth. This anger serves your evolution rather than sabotaging it. There is an energetic integrity that others sense in you. Now, even when you remain silent, people feel your authenticity because you have made peace with your own contradictions. You no longer try to resolve the paradoxes within yourself, but have learned to hold them consciously, allowing them to create the dynamic tension I identified as essential for psychological growth. The way you process emotional intensity has fundamentally shifted. Where once overwhelming feelings could destabilize you for days or weeks, you now have a container strong enough to hold the full spectrum of human experience. Your emotional range has expanded, but your relationship to these feelings has become one of conscious partnership rather than unconscious possession. The third sign manifests as an immunity to projection. Projection is the unconscious process by which people deposit their unprocessed psychological material onto others. You develop an almost scientific ability to observe when someone is making you responsible for emotions, reactions, or insights that belong to them. This recognition comes without anger or superiority. It is simply data about how the human psyche operates when it lacks self-awareness. Drama that once pulled you in like a gravitational force now feels foreign to your system. You watch triangulations, manipulations, and emotional games with a detached interest of a researcher studying natural phenomena. Your compassion evolves from the codependent variety that sacrifices itself to rescue others into a mature compassion, the kind that offers presence without losing itself in another's suffering. This relates to what I term the transcendent function, the psychological capacity to position oneself above dualistic conflicts and perceive larger patterns at work. This function activates within you when others bring you their crisis. You no longer experience the automatic anxiety that once made their emergencies your emergencies. Instead, there is a serene recognition of the limits of your responsibility and the wisdom of allowing others to meet their own challenges. You find yourself naturally stepping back from situations where your energy is being used to maintain someone else's emotional equilibrium. This stepping back is not cruelty, but clarity about the difference between supporting someone's growth and enabling their avoidance of necessary lessons. People may interpret your new boundaries as coldness, but you recognize them as the protection of something sacred within yourself. Your relationship with time undergoes a fundamental reorientation. You no longer experience time as a scarce resource to be hoarded or an enemy to be defeated, but as a dimension of existence to be inhabited fully. The fourth sign emerges in your intuitive capacity, which blossoms into a fully activated function where once you relied primarily on logical analysis, you now consult an inner knowing that connects you to information beyond the reach of rational thought. This is one of the most profound changes. Synchronicities flow through your life with increasing frequency, creating a sense that events align according to an intelligence far greater than your conscious planning. You learn to distinguish between the urgent demands of the wounded ego and the quiet guidance of the self, the archetype of wholeness that emerges when individuation deepens. Your ability to read the invisible layers of people and situations expands exponentially. You perceive motivations, patterns, and outcomes that remain hidden to others, not through cynicism, but through a refined sensitivity to the energetic information flowing beneath surface appearances. Decision-making no longer requires extensive pros and cons lists. Instead, you develop a direct line to your own ancestral wisdom and inner counsel that has access to knowledge accumulated not just through your personal experience, but through the collective unconscious. A quality of listening develops within you that goes far beyond hearing words. You attune to the spaces between sentences, the emotions hiding beneath explanations, the soul speaking through the persona. This listening is not analysis but reception, not judgment, but a witnessing of the full spectrum of human complexity. The fifth sign: death, rebirth, and the cyclical nature of growth. The fifth sign of awakened individuation reveals itself in your embrace of the natural, cyclical nature of psychological development. Where once you resisted endings, you now integrate the archetype of death and rebirth so completely that you no longer fear those periods when life seems to dissolve around you. What once felt like collapse now feels like initiation. These apparent endings are no longer experienced as final. They are recognized as preludes, thresholds, sacred doorways into renewal. Your relationship with uncertainty undergoes a profound shift. Where earlier in your life you sought certainty, demanded guarantees, assurances, predictable outcomes, you now lean into uncertainty as a teacher. You recognize that the most meaningful growth does not occur when everything is planned, controlled, and secure, but in the liminal spaces, the moments between decision and result, the suspended places between loss and rebirth. These thresholds are where the psyche stretches, deepens, and matures. In choosing to act from inner alignment, even when the outcome is unknown, something like an energetic economy begins to work within you. You no longer scatter your life force across dozens of draining commitments. You begin to live more intentionally, like a wise gardener who plants seeds carefully rather than tossing them into barren soil. You invest your time and energy in fertile ground. You also come to see growth not as a straight line, but as a spiral. You revisit the same themes, the same struggles, but at deeper and deeper levels of awareness. This spiral understanding brings patience with yourself. You stop demanding instant resolution. You trust the cycles. You let life ripen you. Creativity, too, undergoes a transformation. Where once you may have created to prove your worth, to achieve recognition, to measure up to some external ideal, now creation becomes something different, a form of communion. To create is not to perform, but to participate in the life force moving through you. It is no longer about proving, but about expressing. The sixth sign: liberation from external validation. The sixth sign emerges in your relationship with external validation. Both I and my contemporary, Alfred Adler, wrote about the inferiority complex, those wounds that drive us to constantly compare, to measure, to prove. This compulsion begins to dissolve within you. Slowly, then completely, the impulse to judge yourself against the shifting standards of society feels alien. You begin to develop what I called inner authority, a psychological structure that validates your experiences independently of collective approval. You no longer outsource your worth. You no longer wait for consensus to grant you permission to trust yourself. Praise and criticism alike are processed not as verdicts, but as information. They no longer penetrate to your core identity. The freedom this creates is enormous. Energy once consumed by image management, by rehearsing performances, defending reputations, craving approval becomes available for authentic living. You no longer live as an actor on a stage, adjusting your mask to suit the audience. You live as yourself, unmasked. This shift makes authenticity non-negotiable. You choose rejection for who you truly are over acceptance for who you are not. This integrity infuses even the way you inhabit your physical body. A groundedness emerges, a sense of genuine self-possession. You move through the world not as one who begs for belonging, but as one who belongs first and foremost to themselves. The seventh sign, energetic sovereignty. The seventh sign manifests as a refined discrimination in how you invest your energy. Individuation culminates in what might be called energetic sovereignty, the ability to protect your essence without hostility, simply through conscious choice. You become more selective, more intentional. Your presence becomes precious because you finally grasp the sacredness of your own life force. You no longer distribute yourself indiscriminately. This is not arrogance, it is wisdom. You understand that energy is finite, and that where you place it shapes who you become. From this sovereignty arises a natural authority, not power over others, but power over yourself. And this is the true hallmark of psychological maturity. The guilt that once plagued you when you set limits dissolves. You learn to protect your energy as naturally as you would protect water in a desert. You begin to recognize who and what drains you, and you withdraw gracefully. You invest only where there is reciprocity, growth, or genuine alignment. Your relationship with suffering also transforms. Where once pain was only an obstacle to be avoided, it becomes a teacher. You no longer romanticize suffering, nor do you fear it. Instead, you extract wisdom from it. Pain becomes the forge in which your character is tempered. Hardship becomes raw material for meaning-making. This maturity generates a quality of stillness around you, not an absence of movement, but a presence of deep-centeredness. Others feel it before they can name it. They are drawn to it, sensing in you an inner solidity that cannot be faked. You become a living example of the individuated soul. Second birth, psychological independence. At this stage, your relationship with hope itself matures. You stop projecting onto the future in the form of wishful thinking. Instead, you develop an active trust, not in specific outcomes, but in your own capacity to meet whatever arises. This is the shift from fragile hope to resilient faith in the life process. This transformation is nothing less than a second psychological birth. You become independent of your early programming. You are no longer defined by the scripts written by parents, teachers, culture, or tradition. You have passed through the fire of individuation and emerged with something entirely your own. Completion arises here not in the sense of finality, but in the sense of reconciliation. You no longer need to recover from your past because you have learned to create from your present. The person you thought you should become fades into insignificance compared to the fullness of who you already are. The journey continues, yes, but a crucial phase is complete. You have endured the soul's most demanding initiation. You emerge, not unscarred, but integrated, not untouched, but unmistakably yourself. The secret revealed, suffering as teacher. The secret I spent my lifetime learning becomes your lived reality. The soul does not grow despite suffering, but through a conscious relationship with it. Your wounds, once hidden in shame, become repositories of wisdom. Your pain becomes your teacher. And with that, you carry a quiet dignity, not the false glow of perfection, but the radiance of wholeness. You are no longer fractured by inner conflict. You have reconciled what you once rejected. You have claimed what you once denied. If you recognize yourself in these signs, know this: you have undergone an initiation that few will ever understand. Your transformation is not merely personal, it is archetypal. It serves not only your own evolution, but also creates a template of possibility for others who will follow. This is individuation. This is the path of becoming. And though your deepest journey has only just begun, you have already passed through the threshold. You have proven that wholeness is possible.